Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Greater Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce's webinar on the new MarylandSaves program, which is designed to encourage employees and employers who do not have a retirement program to get one for their employees. And it was passed a few years ago in the state legislature, and it's been rolled out far and wide beginning in September. So we've gotten a lot of questions at the chamber about it. So we've asked the acting executive director of MarylandSaves, Glenn Simmons, to come and give us an overview of the program, talk to us about the program, and answer any questions. And I also want to thank, we have Delegate Lily Chee with us this morning, who is in the legislature now. And so I know she and I had a conversation earlier about some of the questions that our members have come to us with. So she's joining us as well this morning. So with that, I want to turn it over to Glenn Simmons. And I think you have a PowerPoint, so welcome. And you have the screen share capability now. So whenever you're ready.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Jane and Julie, both for arranging this. I really appreciate it. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I've prepared like just a brief overview about the program and the history of it, why it came to be, and what we're all about. And I know there's been a lot of confusing information out there. A lot of payroll companies have put a lot of conflicting information out there where they were trying to sell their own 401k plans or whatever in advance of us launching. But we did launch September 15th. So without, we'll do just a brief overview of how we got here and what next steps are. But I'd also like to tell you, you can also reach out to me and my staff at any time for questions and answers. Our website, there are two different websites too, and most of the information is on our .com website. So it's MarylandSaves.com. There are a lot of resources up there for employers and employees, and that's where you'll go to register and get more information about the program. So without further ado, here we go. So the reason our program came to be is there's an alarming amount of people in the United States retiring and getting close to retirement with really zero money saved for it. People are just intimidated by it. It's a confusing space, and small businesses, really aren't set up to offer a retirement plan. There's a huge administrative burden on to create a retirement plan, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But this retirement crisis is real, and it's big, and the states are putting these programs together to try to help people retire more comfortably. The most alarming statistic I saw recently was a report that came out of AARP, and it said 48% of people in the country age 55 and older have $0 saved for retirement. And it's just creating a huge burden on state governments, on social services when people retire without money. So that's why the state governments have gotten involved. Maryland is the fifth state-sponsored program to launch nationally. Oregon launched first, followed by Illinois, California, and Connecticut. And there's about 42 states somewhere along the pipeline of launching a program, getting legislation passed, getting staff together, and getting organized. So it's coming. The other thing, the reason we all know anyone can go to their local bank and open a Roth IRA. But the problem is, again, it's the same thing for individuals as it is for employers. It's confusing. People don't understand it. They're afraid of making a bad decision, and they just don't do it. So locally in Maryland, there's about 1 million employees that aren't offered a retirement plan at work. And the data shows that if an employee is offered a plan at work that they can contribute to, they're 15 times more likely to start saving for retirement. So that also came into the plan design for these programs. So the law in Maryland was passed in 2016 under Governor O'Malley. There was a task force created. Kathleen Kennedy Townsend led that committee, and they basically designed the program, set up our board. And the law basically requires employers that pay their employees through an automated payroll system. If they have at least one W-2 employee, they need to offer a plan. So that's one part of the bill. The other part of the bill created our organization, which the legal name of it is the Maryland Small Business Retirement Savings Program. We're marketing under MarylandSaves just because Maryland Small Business Retirement Savings Program is just a mouthful. And our charge was to come up with a plan and design it and roll it out in a way that would be as easy as possible for business owners to participate in. We spent a lot of time doing it. There were some struggles, but I learned it's very, very complicated to create a very simple plan. But I'm very happy with the results that we have because it is very easy. The other thing that's different about Maryland is other states have financial penalties for non-compliance with their laws. Maryland does not have a financial penalty for non-compliance. Instead, we offer more of a carrot approach. So we have the waiver of the annual report filing fee of $300 for every year that a business participates in our program or offers another qualified plan. So Jane and I were speaking a little bit earlier. Her company offers a 401k plan, so they qualify. We've been working with SSTAT, and really the most reliable way to get that fee waiver is to go to our website and claim your exception. I will share our database with SSTAT. They will populate that information in their database. So when you go online to pay that annual report filing fee, your balance or your amount due will automatically show up as zero because you already offer a plan. They're not sure exactly how it's going to work if you file your fee, your annual report with paper, but they're still working on that. But we've got the kinks worked out of the process if you file electronically and register with us. So the Maryland program, you're going to see the two words free and easy in this PowerPoint a lot because that was our focus. It is truly no cost for businesses to set up or register. There's no cost from us. Some payroll companies may charge it an extra fee for setup, but there are many that tell me they're not charging an additional fee to facilitate the state program. And that's in all of the states. And we're kind of working with these national payroll providers to make those arrangements. But participating with MarylandSaves automatically puts you in compliance with the law, or if you offer another qualified program, you're in compliance. So a little more detail about MarylandSaves. They're my two favorite words again, free and easy. Who's it for? And I think this kind of simplifies it as much as possible. It's required for employers if you don't currently offer a retirement plan, and if you've been in business for at least 2 years and have one W-2 employee. So that's who the legislation really applies to on the employer side. For employees, it's completely voluntary for them. So if a business owner uploads their employee census data and enrolls their employees, it's completely up to the employee to manage their account. If they don't do anything, they'll automatically be enrolled, and 5% of their earnings will go into their personal Roth IRA account. They have access to this account. There is a default investment program set up for them if they choose nothing, which is the first $1,000 goes into an emergency savings account. And then the next contribution after $1,000 will roll into the age-appropriate target date fund. And most people seem to be happy with that, but they can log on via the website or call the call center at any time, change those options, or opt out entirely. So as far as eligible employees, they need to be employed in the state of Maryland. So another way of thinking about that is they have to have Maryland wages. Right? So I think that simplifies the eligibility issue. And then the other important piece to note from this slide is this $300 annual report filing fee is not just a one-time deal. It's $300 for every year a business participates in Maryland Saves or offers another qualified plan. And we feel that that at least helps offset any kind of extra time it takes to process payroll, or maybe any additional fees or setup fees a payroll company might charge to facilitate the program. So for employers, again, we're trying to make it easy for businesses to comply with the new law. Another important piece is employers have no legal responsibilities or fiduciary role in the program. We take that all on ourselves. Our board acts as fiduciaries for this plan, and there's no IRS filing that businesses need to do. These are Roth IRAs. They belong to the individual employees. And we're thinking that, you know, in the small business community, this will also help attract and retain talent in this post-COVID environment. The other important piece is employers are not responsible for program education. You know, if employees ask you for, you know, information about the program, we strongly encourage people to say, you need to call the call center or go to the website for information. And they will do that. We don't want to put that burden on the employers as well. There are also downloadable resources on the website that you can download, post and break rooms and things like that. So we've really intentionally designed this so the employer's role is as minimal as possible. And speaking to the administrative role and the time it would take to set up a plan, our friends at Pew Trust put this chart together, and it really is dramatic. If a business owner wants to set up their own retirement plan, here's a list of all the kinds of things that they need to do in order to be in compliance with the DOL, IRS, and all the other governing bodies. And it's a lot of work, and including, you know, you do have fiduciary duty, you do have to file additional forms with the IRS, the DOL, you have to process distributions. There's a lot of administrative stuff that a business would have to do. In contrast with if a business participates in Maryland Saves, you need to upload a list of your employees, which you already have if you're processing payroll, and then just maintain your employee records and process the contributions. So we've eliminated a lot of the administrative burden. So for employees, again, they're in control of their account. They can change their contribution anytime they want, or put it on pause or on hold. And all the rules that apply to Roth IRAs apply to these accounts. So there are contribution limits. They're going up to $6,500 for people under age 50, $7,500 catch up for people aged who are older than 55. Maryland Saves has this built-in emergency savings feature. And again, this is becoming a trend in larger plans across the country because, you know, life happens. And we're giving people some easy access to money if their kids get sick or they need a car repair. Hopefully it'll keep them from taking out a payday loan. We're trying to create this psychological barrier between their first $1,000 of contributions, and hopefully when they get beyond that, they'll leave the larger pot and focus on their retirement. And then the other piece is, and it falls under the administrative piece. If, let's just say a business, you're a restaurant owner, and you have high turnover in employees. If an employee leaves, you don't have to do anything. There's no complicated rollovers. It's a Roth IRA. That account goes with them. The employer would simply stop making contributions to the account. So again, we feel it's very, very easy to administer. There's virtually no paperwork for the employer to do. And at this point, I'd like to introduce you to Courtney Eccles, who's also on the call. She is with Vestwell, who is our program administrator, and she can explain in more detail what the registration process is like.
Glenn, can we interject for a second before we go to Courtney? We have a bunch of questions in the chat that I think that are a little pre the registration process, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. I'm just going to go back and start kind of from the beginning. I think you've answered some of these. One point that was made is that it costs businesses administrative time. So it's not really that free. There isn't a lot of administration involved. So that was one of the points made. I think you answered, do employees have to re-register every time they switch payrolls? And you're saying that once an employee is registered within the state of Maryland, they are in the program, and no matter where they work, they will be in the program. So what would the new employer have to do?
They would just add them to their payroll process, and however that's absorbed, right? So they would be included in their list of employees. Each employer gets their own dashboard when they enroll, and when they're processing payroll, they can log on to the site, and if there have been no changes from the last time they processed payroll, it's a very clean interface, and you can scroll through it. Everything will be color-coded green, meaning there's no changes, and you can simply select run just like the last payroll period.
So that means that that answers another question that was asked a little bit later. So that means that an employer has to interface with this or with this portal every time they do payroll.
If there's not an integration. Courtney, do you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, and actually, I know, Jane, you had suggested maybe we cover some of these questions now, but I think I can answer a few of these when I walk through the employer process of registering and then maintaining contributions, if that's helpful.
Okay, let's start there then.
Okay.
I actually have a question I would like to have answered. In the hospitality sector, we have employees come and go constantly.
Yeah.
It's never a payroll where it's like, oh, it's all exactly the same as it was last week, especially post-COVID. Things have just been in absolute disarray for the last couple of years. So this is going to be an administrative cost, especially to the hardest hit businesses that were completely shut down during COVID. So they're still struggling, trying to recover. So I just want to make sure that I'm very, I understand that this is probably the easiest way you can make this, the most simple way you can do this program. And I appreciate the efforts. And I definitely appreciate the state is doing carrots instead of sticks for participation. Thank you for that. But I do want to make very clear, this is going to be an administrative burden, especially the hospitality sector. We have employees that will go work at another bar or restaurant, and then they come work for us. So what happens when that employee was already registered by another business and then they come work for us? We obviously, to add them to our payroll, is the state going to automatically know that they're getting deductions into their account? Like, there is going to be some sort of administrative transfer there, right? I mean, this is all, it's more complicated, I think, than if you're in a stable industry where people have a job and they just work there and they never leave. This is going to be an extremely simple thing. And quite frankly, as a hospitality business, we would love to offer retirement plans to our employees. And in fact, we were going to do that for our salaried senior management, but then COVID happened and threw everything off. So, but when you're talking about frontline employees who literally, some people work 4 hours a week, some people work 15, they work multiple jobs. I just don't know how this is not going to turn into total mayhem. So I just am hoping that there is a plan in place to make that situation as little as possible in terms of administrative burden, because it's going to be complete mayhem. I just wanted to say that. So if you could go into detail about that, that would be great. Thank you.
Glenn, did you want me to touch on that specific piece about employees with multiple employers first, and then we'll dive into registration?
Yes, please.
Sure. So thank you, Julie. I definitely very much appreciate your point about hospitality industry. And I think, one of the things that we've certainly tried to focus on, and maybe I should take a step back. So I work with Vestwell, which is the financial services company that partners with MarylandSaves and a number of the other states. So we are sort of the entity that works and administers the program on behalf of Maryland and MarylandSaves. And I guess one of the things I would start by saying is in the states that we have worked with, including Maryland, we know that the hospitality industry, and in fact, many part-time workers, often make up the core of participants in these programs. So needing to think about individuals with multiple part-time jobs or individuals who might move or transition from jobs multiple times throughout the year is definitely something we think about for the saver experience and also for you as employers. So I think at the core of it, and I'll try and touch on the different points that you raised, savers in the program will only ever have one single account. Even if they have multiple employers in the state who are participating in MarylandSaves, the benefit to a worker is maybe unlike a 401k, they will always only have one MarylandSaves account, and they can have multiple employers connected to that. From the employer perspective, to your point, you don't ever have to worry about whether your employee is connected through multiple avenues to their account or whether they're connected through just one. As far as you're concerned, you're only thinking about your employees when they work for you. You're also not responsible for doing anything after they leave, if they leave and then come back. That's, I think, a different component to these programs than what you might find in a 401k, where once you have a worker, it's your responsibility to maintain and continue their account, even if they've left, until they say roll it out. So hopefully that eases some of your concern about that piece of it. So the way that it will work is you will add your employees. You'll do that initial upload when you register for the program. And then when you have new employees, you can add those in. And I think this touches a little bit on how you use the system. And I'll jump to future slides in a minute, but I want to get to your questions. So we know that employers process payroll at different frequencies, onboard new employees differently. And I think the program is set up to create some flexibility for you there. And we see employers do different things. Some employers just like to add a couple of new employees whenever they're going in to check on payroll. If they do that, bi-weekly or twice monthly, they'll just add new employees. Other employers have sort of a test period for their employees, right? And so they won't add somebody until after they've made it through that window. And the system allows for that type of flexibility because it's really meant to adapt to how you do your HR and your payroll at your company with your business, right? So maybe what I should do is walk through the registration, but I wanted to at least touch on those points where you're not responsible for moving anybody around. You just look at your workforce, and there is flexibility in the system so that you're adding employees at a time when it makes sense for you, whether that's at a frequency that's consistent with your payroll or whether you're doing it, after someone's temporary period of being hired.
Let me just clarify what you just said. Mm-hmm. So if an employer chooses to have a waiting, like a lot of companies do for a regular 401k, to have a waiting period of 30 days, 60 days, whatever, you can put that in place as an employer here with this program.
Yeah, and Glenn may be able to touch on this more. There's, a sort of a broader window of when an employer needs to add employees. But the idea is that it's flexible enough so that if you're an employer who wants to get folks started right away, you can. If you've got a 30-day, sort of temporary period, right, you can add them after that fact, which I think deals with some of the movement of employees who may work for a week or two and then move on.
Okay.
So let me just take a step back here and dive in a little bit on this registration process and what it looks like. And I know Glenn talked about it a little bit and really want to underscore, yes, we know that there's going to be a period of time that you have to use initially for onboarding, and then those periods where you come in and basically upload your contribution file. But we truly have tried to make this as easy as possible. And so you'll see that we really talk about it as kind of a 3-step process. You register for the program, which means setting up your account, right? Having access to your employer account online through the employer portal. When you do that, you're going to, verify what email address you want to have communicated. You'll set your password. You'll make sure that you've got your mailing address and physical address, if they're the same or different. And it's also where you add your employees. And I can go into a little bit more detail on what that looks like. It's a basic census file. But after that period of time, we as the program really take over. It's our responsibility to send communications to each of those employees that you've added that tell them what the program is, how it works. We send multiple notices to remind them, hey, you've been added. This is an opportunity. If you'd like to opt out, here's how you do it. If you'd like to make changes, here's where you can make those. And then after that period of time is when you would go in and set up and do your contribution. So really the ongoing maintenance is about submitting contribution files whenever you run your payroll. Again, that's based on what you as an employer do. There's no stated schedule. And it's also where you would add new employees. So maybe Glenn, if you could jump to the next slide, I can cover a little bit more detail. Oh, there you go. So this is just a set of information. And I know that the registration looks a little bit daunting with the list of bullets, but as I mentioned, it really is just basic information. So for prior to registering, what you will receive from the state is an access code. This is going to be a communication that comes to you either via email or via letter, depending on whether we have contact information. And so you'll log in by using your SDAT number and the access code provided to you by the program. And we do that just to ensure that we know who you are and that you've got this unique access code as a business. Once you do that, that's where you'll go through this registration step of, making sure you've got the right mailing address, making sure you have the right point of contact. It's also where you can add an administrative user. So if you are the owner of your business, but you have one of your staff who does the HR and actually submits the payroll, you can set them up as an administrative user and they'll have access to the account. This is where you will indicate to us who your payroll company is. As Glenn mentioned, we're in the process of building out the number of integrations that we have with payroll companies. That's one way in which you might do the onboarding, but your payroll company is actually the one who will just remit contributions as part of their process for you already, to just continue to limit the amount of new items that you have to deal with as an employer. You'll put your bank account information in there, and then you'll add your employees. And then the next step in sort of the yellowish box, right, that's where you'll just go in and check before you run that first payroll to see if everybody's contributions have stayed at 5%. This is what Glenn was mentioning. Visually, we've tried to make it really easy. You actually also get communications from the program. So a few days prior to that first payroll date you told us, and prior to each payroll date, you'll get an email that tells you if any employees have made changes or not. That's one way we really try to simplify the process so that you can just do it in your payroll system right there. And then you'll submit payroll deduction files whenever you run your payroll. So that's a little bit of detail there. And I know we've got more questions coming in.
So we upload the files to MarylandSaves after we've finished running payroll in our other payroll companies thing.
It really, it depends on if your payroll company has an integration directly with
which payroll companies do you guys have in the works for that?
We've got a couple different ones, and since I don't have the exhaustive list right off the top of my head, we've got that information available on our website, but we have actually an integration that we just rolled out with QuickBooks Online this month. So that's something where you've got a direct integration if you utilize QuickBooks. And then we're working with a number of regional providers to get things set up in the coming months.
I think that is, I want to applaud you for doing the QuickBooks Online. That's the #1 payroll service that the smallest of the small businesses use. So thank you for doing that. That's
yeah, absolutely. We want to make sure it's as easy as possible, as Glenn said.
Yeah, and one other point I would like to make here about the registration process, and that's the notion of the access code, right? So again, Jane and I were talking a little bit earlier, because we are not housed in a state agency, the state of Maryland is not sharing all of their database with us. So we've put together a list of about, I would say we have a little more than 50% of Maryland businesses that we have good contact information for, and we're reaching out to via direct marketing, mailing, and emails, as Courtney mentioned. I'm working on getting another data list to cover the other businesses that we haven't contacted yet. But we're continuing to work on social media and some paid media too to get the word out. And if businesses have not received an access code, they can go to our website and request one and start the process that way. So that's the message we're trying to get out right now. And hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we'll start this other direct mail campaign with another list of information that I have to try to get the word out to the remaining businesses in Maryland. But
Yeah,
we're
that's
really
what I was going to
relying.
interject, because I went through the process, and we never got an access code. So I went online looking. And so that's something that needs to be communicated, because if
Yep.
businesses need to get online, they're not going to, a lot of them are not going to get that access code up front.
Correct. And that's unfortunately just a problem with getting access to the data. We are working on that. So perhaps after, in the next year or so, we will get access to that data, but I've been working on it for 3 years and I've just been unable to crack that so far. We always like to do things a little more complicated in Maryland.
I work with a lot of businesses, and my clients are still not clear on which businesses are required to comply or not. Does it depend whether they're literally registered with the state, which many sole proprietor businesses with lots of employees are not. Legally, they don't have to, right?
Right.
Or if they're in another state, but they have remote employees in Maryland, do they apply? Like, they're just not sure if the law applies to them or not. Could you, and I put some questions in the chat, but it seemed like that was building on what you just said. So I thought maybe if you could explain a little more detail who must comply with this, because then they'd be happy to go get an access code.
Right. So sole proprietors in particular do not need to comply, but however, they can participate if they want to, right? So the program is designed to be as open and available to any business that wants to participate as possible. And again, there's no compliance penalty if you don't, right? The only possible thing you're giving up is that $300 fee waiver. And unfortunately, people we don't have good contact information for might miss that for calendar year 23. But we're really trying to get the word out to everybody. So again, it's that carrot, not a stick. And we want to be open to everybody, like individuals, like 1099 employees, gig workers, Uber drivers. We've made allowances for them to participate in the program should they choose to do so. We're not going to go around. Yeah, we're not going to be the compliance police on this. Our goal is simply to expand retirement coverage for the citizens of the state of Maryland. And again, be as business friendly as possible.
But just to clarify, because you said earlier, if they have Maryland wages. So to expand on what Andrea just asked, if it's a company that's in Pennsylvania that has employees in Maryland, I mean, and I understand now that there's no enforcement and there's no way to do that, but how are those that they have Maryland wages because they're in Maryland, but their employer is an out-of-state company?
Right, and they would not be required to comply because they're not they're not physically the business is not, they're registered probably to do business in Maryland, right?
Well, maybe or maybe not. Yeah,
Right.
if they just have a remote employee but they don't have any business activity in the state, then they might not be registered with the state.
Right.
So you're saying if they're not registered with the state as a foreign LLC or something like that, they don't need to comply technically. They shouldn't go look for an access code. They could, but they don't have to.
They could if they want to. Yes.
Okay. And then if they have some employees in a Maryland business that is registered and they have Maryland employees and they have Virginia employees, should they be uploading the Virginia employees in that employee census that they're uploading?
No, just the Maryland employees.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's really based on the physical location. For example, we use.
Can they though? Can they upload the Virginia people? I mean, that's going to be really weird for a business where half their employees get it and the other half don't.
I believe they could, Courtney. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I believe, I mean, they can upload their employees if they're planning to facilitate for all of them. The kind of qualifier is, the Maryland wages. But to your point, if you're a single business and you have, folks who you have one location in Virginia and one in Maryland, but Maryland is where you're registered, you can add them into the system.
But for example, my one employee lives in the district. So if I were to participate in Maryland Saves, would I enroll her as well?
Does she receive
She works
wages
in
in
Maryland.
Maryland?
We
Yep.
pay her in Maryland.
Yep.
But she lives in the district.
Yeah, so where someone lives, you don't have to worry about that piece. It's are they an employee who receives wages in the state of Maryland?
Okay, so that's that one. So then if on the other level, I'm a Maryland employer, but I have a branch office in Virginia. Do I have to give it to those employees, or may I give it to those employees? Like, it's two questions, I guess.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Well, again, we've tried in dealing with the Maryland Association of CPAs, tried to really refine this definition of covered employees, because the statute, it's a little loose, right?
Yeah.
But again, I think it's designed to be flexible, and what the employer really wanted to do. We were using the example before of like if an employer owned multiple like pizza franchises, and they had a franchise in maybe 3 in Maryland, 1 in Virginia, then the Maryland folks, because those franchises are physically located in Maryland, would be eligible to participate, maybe not the Virginia one.
Okay.
Okay, can you answer, does your program allow for a business that has 2 physical locations in the state of Maryland?
Yes.
So I can
Absolutely.
register 2 physical locations, even though it's one single business.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
And sorry, Julie, I had meant to cover that in the registration component. So we try to, from a system standpoint, we try to again create some flexibility there. So if you are an employer with a single EIN and multiple locations, you'll get that access code, you'll set it up, and you can, within the system, you can put all of your employees together under one payroll group, because regardless of location, they all get paid the same way. If, say, you're a business where you've got 2 locations and you pay those employee groups separately, you can set up multiple groupings of your employees within your account. So that way it ideally would align with however it is that you've structured payments, regardless of, number of locations and number of businesses. The other thing is, if you happen to be an owner and you have multiple businesses, different locations, and they have separate EINs, that's still something that you can maintain under a single account. We allow folks to join them together. Again, like there are lots of restaurant groups where it might be a single group with multiple businesses, and those can be joined together too. So regardless of how it's structured, we try to maintain that in a way that gives you access through one account. I hope that makes sense.
I'm going to go back to a couple of questions in the chat. And one question is, what is the employer's contribution to each employee that's registered? You mentioned an enrolled employee will be an automatic deduction of 5%. What's the match for the employer?
There is no employer match. There's no way to do that because these are Roth IRAs. So all of the contributions come out of the earnings by the employee. We know that's different with 401k. You have that option, and some employers want to be able to have that ability. And we may try to address that in the future by offering a different product. But right now, all of the rules that apply to Roth IRAs apply to these accounts. So there is no way for an employer to make a contribution.
Okay. And the Roth is an after-tax deduction, right?
There you go. Thank
Correct.
you.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And the reason for that is the data shows that a lot of our participants and participants in other state programs rely on this money sometimes for emergencies. And just by using a Roth, it makes it easier for folks to get access to that money without a tax penalty. They can take their contributions without penalties.
So there's no deduction, 10% penalty for life-changing events in the Roth option.
If you withdraw the contributions, earnings are subject to the 10% penalty.
So this will all be deducted post-tax.
Correct.
Okay.
I got some plan design questions that Julie had raised it as well. Can you have parallel investment programs? In my example, I was thinking, you know, a full-time employees and one with tenure would have a 401k plan because maybe the contributions limits are different, and they also have the pre-tax deduction option, obviously. But also for the rotating door of part-time employees, where the administrative piece of that and the duration of time and all of these other factors that seem very beneficial to somebody looking to save as a post-tax savings would be just for my part-time or under 20 hour or under 25 hours, whatever those statute is, 30 hours even part-time, would be maintained for them. Is there any restriction to allowing this to occur? Thank you.
The short answer to that is yes. There are restrictions, but they're not our restrictions. They're restrictions in place by the DOL, right? And if you offer two different plans, I think you would be opening yourself up to some ERISA problems and discrimination testing issues. So we are advising all employers not to have two different plans.
Another question from the chat: is the call center prepared to help those employees whose first language is not English, or people who are unfamiliar with retirement savings plans or not financially savvy? And I guess the two questions, because the website is currently in English, is there an option for our diverse community of not all English speakers around here?
Yeah, so the call center is equipped to handle English and Spanish and multiple other languages. And the call center is probably the best way to field non-English speaking assistance requests.
Okay.
Can I?
Go ahead.
Be okay to go back to the answer you just gave, Glenn, about not having two different plans, because you know, I have a lot of business clients who have, just as Damon said, you know, maybe they have a 401k in place and there are perfectly legal compliant restrictions on who can participate in that 401k. So, you know, DOL provides for that. And now that same business is going to be required to register all of their employees with MarylandSaves. But so
if you already offer a plan, and not even to all of your employees, but to some of them, then you are exempt from the MarylandSaves compliant because of the issues it would raise.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Have another question. We received our, oops, it just popped. We received our access code, but had to search for it in our inbox and not being aware that MarylandSaves and thought it was spam.
Yeah.
So you're going to work on that with your education program, but if it's social media and if it's email, how are people going to know it's not spam?
Well, hopefully just the brand awareness over time. You know, we ran our first splash was as the Orioles were making a run to the playoffs. We ran a small flight on Masson to get out there, and we are reaching out through efforts like this too are important because a lot of people just hear MarylandSaves, and it is easy to say, oh, that's just spam. I don't know what this is. This could be a phishing scheme. That's why we're trying to work hard with other business groups to have these opportunities to say, yes, this is legit, this is real, and this is how it works.
Okay. We have implemented a retirement plan with ADP. Do we still need to register with MarylandSaves? I think you've answered that. To get the $300 deduction, yes.
Yeah, get the $300. If you don't want it, then don't worry about it. But I would take the $300 every year. It takes less than 5 minutes to get that exception too. It's a small form, 5 minutes in and out.
Okay. And sorry, just to add to that, to Glenn's point. So for people who already have a plan and they're coming to exempt, they're not actually going to go through this registration process that we have listed on the website. There's a separate area where you indicate your exemption. You add that access code and your SDAT number, and then a box pops up to say, you know, you indicate which type of plan you offer so that we have that as a record for why you're getting the exemption. So I just want to make sure folks understand you're exempting if you already offer a plan, and that's separate from registration. Both of them lead to the waiver, and it's a different process within the system on the website.
And it is easy, but you don't ever get a notification or a confirmation that you're exempt. There's nothing that comes back that says, okay, you're exempt.
If you don't add an email address, then we aren't able to send something. But if there's a step at the end where if you would like it, you just add your email address and then it should send you an exemption. So that if that didn't happen,
It didn't happen. I need to go back and look then.
So
we will look into that. Sure. Yeah.
Courtney, that may be a little bit different because, again, there are two ways to claim that exemption. One is if you've received the access code, right? And then you're going into the best will system. But again, because of our data problems, there are two paths to claim that exemption. So if you get led to the form that you fill out that's not on the Vestal site, and it's hard to tell, I know that, you fill it out, and after you complete it, a message pops up. I'm not sure you're getting an email from that, but that is something I can look into and see if I can get that generated.
Okay, that'd be great. Can household employers sign their employees up for this?
Yes.
Okay. Are 1099 people are considered employees, or are they? Are 1099? They're not. Okay.
They're independent contractors, but the employer cannot enroll them just because of the nature of a 1099 employee. The 1099 employee would have to enroll themselves if they're interested and link a personal savings or checking account to their account with MarylandSaves. And they can do it like a bill pay. They can schedule it, or they can just go on. I think the minimum requirement, Courtney, is $5 a month contribution to start an account. So it's very low table stakes to start saving.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Julie, did you get the answer to your question about only, I'm not sure I can ask it in the right way.
No, it's not.
No, to clarify, companies have to only use if we have nothing right now, we have no retirement set up. I mean, me as a business owner, I haven't been able to save for retirement since I started this business, that's a whole nother freaking topic.
Amen.
But, so here's, so if I have nothing in place right now, I have to either set up MarylandSaves for 100% of my employees, which means that my higher level management staff are going to be hamstrung because then I will not legally be able to offer them something better. Or I can set up something better for just my management staff right now and avoid doing this for everyone else on my team. That seems to be what my only options are based off what I heard you say.
Yeah, I think you're correct with that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I didn't understand the thing in the chat, so thank you for that. When can you claim the $300 credit? What time of the year? How does that happen?
So that's the annual process with SDAT, which we really have no control over, right? And it's a little bit odd. The filing deadline is April 15th, but as everyone on this call knows, when you file your business taxes or your personal taxes on April 15th, that's for the previous calendar year. SDAT works differently. When you file that annual report, that is for calendar year 23. Their systems are a little bit old and it takes a while to get information ingested. So they're telling us they need to have our data by December 1st to guarantee that the people that are participating in our program or have exempted will be qualified to receive that a calendar year 23 exemption.
Can you say that one more time?
I'll do my best. So
we have to register by December 1st is what you're saying. That
yeah,
apply to the exemption or register by December 1st.
because it takes SDAT a long time. They're not nimble with their data processing at all to do this.
Okay. I want to give Delegate Lily Chi an opportunity to say something, make a comment if she wants to, or if she has any questions before we open it up again for more questions from our audience. Thank you for joining us.
Well, hi, Jane. First of all, thank you so much for reaching out to my office. We had a very productive call just recently, and thank you for alerting me of the fact that many small businesses just have no idea this program even existed, and has as a great resource. This has been a really informative session and educational for me. I think honestly, I think a lot of legislators don't know, how to use this resource to benefit their communities, businesses. And in the past couple of sessions, I have been trying to waive the $300 fee period for all businesses. That's a different subject. But I hope we could come up with even better carrot, along with more aggressive, proactive communication with our small businesses, because it sounds great that not only does it sound fairly simple to set up, but also there's no employer match, which is wonderful for our really small businesses and potential retirees. So whatever I can do on my end, along with my colleagues, I stand ready to be a partner. So thank you very much, Jane.
Well, and thank you for your support and for your efforts on our behalf to get that filing fee taken away, because I know in past years there have been others of your colleagues who've tried to get it increased pretty dramatically. So we appreciate your efforts for us. So.
Yeah, I've had conversation, and it was late in the session last year where I was working with representatives from SDAT to try to really streamline the whole thing. For all Maryland businesses. For example, if we had all the data that we needed and the business already has a 401k plan, we would be able to figure that out because they would file a Form 5500. We could do a Form 5500 search and automatically exempt all of those employers. But because we don't have the data, we weren't able to do that. So we would greatly appreciate the delegates' help on anything you could do to help us with this data. And happy to talk with you offline and meet with you personally. Courtney knows some of the hoops I was trying to jump through to get this done, to really make this simple for Maryland business owners. When we first did focus groups back in 2018, when I was first hired, the mandatory sick leave legislation just passed. And business owners in the room, it was just downright hostile when I started, right? They're like, well, how much is this going to cost me? But when I explained it to them that, what we're going to try to build and everything, they're like, well, yeah, this makes sense. Why wouldn't I do this, right? And that's kind of where we want to be. But I don't often have the ability to talk to a business owner for 20 minutes and explain it to them. We're trying to get our messaging out and get the website so that information translates efficiently. We still have work to do. And I think there's a lot of communications that needs to happen. We've started that, but keep in mind, we've just started that on September when the program launched. So there is a lot more communication coming down the pike.
Can I make a suggestion to make things a little bit easier for businesses? I don't know if you've done this or not. So whenever we hire a new employee, we have a folder that we have all the paperwork for. And again, because we're in hospitality, we onboard people constantly. So what would be nice is if you had a single sheet of paper that we could print as a PDF form that collects all the information we need from that employee. So on their very first day of work, we have everything we need to be able to upload this thing. Do you have something like that already set up?
So we have a front and back. It's basically a 2-page PDF overview of the program for employers and employees, right? And
that's not what I'm talking about.
Well,
I need to know what specifically we need to collect. Is it their social security number? Is it their full name, their address, how much money they want to take out? I need to have a form, not something akin to either, an I-9 or a W-4, all of those things that are onboarding paper. We need to be able to have something that's printable that I can put in that folder and say, here, employee, on your first day, before you start your shift, fill everything out here. And then I have a complete packet so that when I run payroll the next week or the 2 weeks from then, I have everything I need to do that. So if you guys could create that, that would be absolutely ideal. And I'm telling you, you will save headaches and phone calls to your staff on top of ours across the board if you create something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something really easy for us to do, but Courtney, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I think we're operating under the supposition that that's all, it's just information that you need to process your payroll anyway.
Yeah, I was going to chime in there. That's really helpful feedback to hear, Julie, and something we can look at. I think one of the reasons we haven't gone ahead and sort of made a separate form is that the basic information that you upload in your census file is what you would already collect in order to have the general background information on your employees. So it's, birth date, address, social security number. And I think because we try to really direct the system to be largely electronic, we hadn't created sort of additional separate forms, since you'll be inputting that information in as part of your hiring.
I am making a specific request as a small business owner that onboards people constantly. Please make this form. I'm telling you right now, I understand your position. It's going to be online for you. For me as an employer, I have 2 locations. I have managers that onboard people. I'm not personally onboarding everybody all over the place. This is going to save me a bajillion hours of administrative time tracking the stuff down, because sometimes people don't actually fill out all of the forms completely. We have to constantly be following people. Please, I am begging you to create this form. If you have this form, this will be extremely helpful. I am not a unique employer. This is true across all hospitality businesses. Please make this form. Thank you.
I completely agree. And I think it's true for other industries too. Construction, landscaping, you name it.
I had a question back to the compliance and the regulations regarding ERISA. Can you please explain that one more time? Because I still think like this mandate of having a plan, albeit good and free and obviously ease of use, but it forces somebody who can't do it for one reason or another, whether it's willingly or unwillingly. I personally would like to do something, but if I can't, then I won't. But now I'm being forced to. Am I wrong there?
So a couple things. So MarylandSaves is not an ERISA plan. But we do try to follow, all the legal guidelines and stuff like that.
You just said you can't have 2 at the same time. Like in that example, how the management who's been tenured and has been here, is full-time, rather, I was just trying to make a distinctive line between hourly versus salaried, as an example, and such, where this would be a set of ERISA plans because of the benefits associated with that ERISA plan. And you said for those who are transitional employees would qualify for this. So then as strategy, I would only onboard my part-time people as 1099. When then as an employer, I don't get the employer benefits from it, but I could get but the flip side is I get a better benefit for my salaried employees and my people who will contribute to the higher contributions and get the pre-tax deduction. And you pay more for that. I pay $170 a month for that administration. Right. But now you're forcing me. But if I can't do that, because I can't afford the $170 a month and to even make any viable contributions as a small business owner, like Julie said, because I haven't saved in 7 years, 8 years. Right. But now I'm forced to do something and not be able to have what I want. And I'm forced to have it mandated for my employees. As a small business, I have to sign up for this, regardless if I have the thing or not.
So there is no penalty for noncompliance, first of all. And then secondly, we do not recommend you have 2 plans because it will cause problems on your end. It won't cause problems on our end. They'll cause problems for you with the DOL, with discrimination testing and so forth. So you're really not being forced. The only thing that would happen is under the current statute, you would have to continue to pay the $300 annual report filing fee.
But Damon raises an interesting question that if I'm a small business owner and I can't afford to set up the kind of 401k plan that I want to right now, I just don't have the resources to do it. I would like to, but I don't. And I worry about discrimination and all that kind of stuff, even though there are some that you can specify certain structure around. What if I decide though, what if, maybe I've set this, so I have to set this plan up for my employees. I set it up. Then what if 3 or 4 years down the road, I do have the wherewithal to have a real 401k where I can also contribute? What happens?
That's great. You start your 401k plan, make better contributions for your employees. They can save at a higher rate, contribution levels. You just stop participating in MarylandSaves. That's it. People can still have their Roth IRA accounts if they want to continue them, or they can roll them into your plan if your plan allows. There's no penalty for upgrading your retirement plan. And a lot of people will use these kind of plans as a starter plan. As the business is growing and transition to something else, that's great. Again, as I said at the beginning, these programs are all about expanding coverage.
So you can expand, you can go to a better thing in 3 or 4 years and kick off all the hourly employees. Because that's what I would do.
Yeah, and if I could chime in, I mean, the distinction between these programs, and it's something that we as an administrator who works with the state have to be very clear on. There are guidelines around what, if you are an ERISA plan, what that means and what the responsibilities are and how you determine ERISA eligibility and preemption of state activity. And I certainly do not pretend to be an ERISA attorney, but part of the clear delineation with a state auto IRA program is that it is not an ERISA plan. And so employers are not subject to the same requirements and responsibilities that an ERISA plan would offer. And so I think to your point, Damon, one of the things that makes these distinct is that with the state programs, because there is a requirement in state law, now to Glenn's point, how those are enforced may vary from a state perspective, but there is a requirement in state law, which means employers are not proactively choosing. Right. You're sort of saying, I can choose to offer an employer-sponsored plan. Those are governed by ERISA. If you don't offer an employer-sponsored plan, then you are facilitating the state program, which is not a proactive choice. And that's one of the things that keeps it separate and apart from ERISA. And so the issue, and it's still a gray area, it's something that lots of folks are looking at and thinking about, but the issue of offering a 401k and choosing, or sorry, I shouldn't say 401k, some type of employer-sponsored plan, and choosing to then also have the state plan is where you get into this murky area of, are you proactively making multiple decisions, which could then change your action as an employer? So I hope that makes sense. It's really about you as an employer can choose to offer an ERISA plan. That's great. You abide by those rules that you need to. Otherwise, you facilitate a state program, your role is different, your responsibilities are different, and that's because it's separate from ERISA. When you start to make proactive choices outside of the state requirement, that's when it gets murky. So I hope that was helpful. I don't know if it just made things more confusing.
No, I think that was a great explanation. And obviously I've sold ERISA plans in my previous life, and I'm familiar with, the restrictions and the benefits of such. My other question here is, what is the basis points for the management fee for this plan for the state? What is the investment cost to the employee once you get into those? Obviously different dates would have different potentially management fees, but what is the basis points for management administration for this that MarylandSaves benefits from? Thank
you. So we looked at this long and hard. So the various investments have their own basis points. MarylandSaves, the program, we're waiving all of our fees for the first year, and Vestwell is waiving their fees for the first quarter to make sure that people who sign up or don't realize they're in the program and they want to opt out after they start seeing the deductions in their checks don't incur any fees. But it's a combination of a flat fee system and basis points. So with all the various investments and options, basically the first year the fees total about $20 and maybe $28 for the second year. And we're a small nonprofit, so one of our goals is also to drive those fees down every year as we can as our assets under management grow. And once we get to a certain point with assets under management, we will probably be switching to a flat fee for participants after they've been in the program for a while, but that's subject to further negotiation. But we're very low. I think our fees are lower than what you're going to find at a commercial bank down the street, and that's our goal, and to keep driving them down lower. Does that answer your question, Damon?
In a roundabout way, yeah. Is there I'm sure you've probably figured that out by now. What is, you said is $20 a year for administrative flat fee, but what is the percentage for the investments?
That all that information is on the website.
Is that yeah, go ahead.
There's a whole fees section on the website, and that's all up there. The individual, the basis points for the individual funds are up there, as well as the admin costs.
And that's the .com website, right?
Yes, MarylandSaves.com.
Yeah, which I put in the chat. Okay, I want to honor everybody's time this morning. We are 7 minutes after the hour. We did start a couple minutes late. Does anyone else have a question?
Hey, Jane, it's Tosh. I had one question.
Yes.
Glenn. Hey, Glenn, I'm Tosh Thomas. I'm president CEO of an IT company. You mentioned that contribution down the road could be something that you guys may look into from an employer perspective. My concern is with, from a workforce perspective, the great resignation or reshuffle, whatever we call it, how it affects my organization, government contracting, is being able to get individuals to be not uploading your team and everybody opts out. That's kind of a waste, right? If nobody's going to participate in it, unless there's an employer contribution, what makes it a little bit more shinier. Is that something that's even possible, it being an IRA, or just law mandates IRA, there could be no employer contribution?
Yeah, the law says with the IRA product, there can be no employer contributions at all. We would have to add a different product line, and this would be years down the road, a multiple employer plan or something like that in order to accomplish that. Some states are looking into establishing those now, and we'll stay on top of that because we have had people I've talked with early on that were very interested in the program, but once they realized that, like you, they couldn't make a contribution on their employees' behalf, they went ahead and started a SEP or something else.
And Taj, just to let you know, the program was enacted, the law was enacted in 2016, and the purpose of the program at that point in time was not to create an expense to the employer. It was just to provide the employees an option. And I understand your question right now with it looks much more shiny when the employer is going to contribute. I agree with that, but that's the history of the program. It was created to not cost the employer anything but some administrative, and then to actually put that carrot out.
Yeah, and what's hard about that, Jane, is if that's the case, you're going to have a lot of employees who don't sign up. So I can upload 10 employees, they all get an email, they all opt out because it's a savings plan again, right? So us contributing makes it a little bit more shiny, makes it actually makes it a little bit more attractive for onboarding and even recruiting. So just my take, but thank you. It's amazing. I mean, it's something for somebody, right? So thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? I don't see the whole screen, so if there's any other questions, please let me know. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. I want to thank Glenn Simmons and Courtney Eccles for this great explanation and for answering a lot of our difficult questions that we've heard. I think there's still some confusion in some areas, but that's just going to be that way because of the way the law was written and the way that we've seen in the past. Data sharing and information business list sharing is not something that Maryland does well. We've seen that in other situations. So, but thank you, everybody. Thank you for being with it. Thank you again, Delegate Chi, for joining us this morning and for all of your support. We really appreciate that. We appreciate you. And thank you, everyone, for coming. We are recording. So I'm going to ask Julie to please end the recording right now, and everyone have a wonderful day. And if you have any other questions, let us know. But that website is www.MarylandSaves.com, where you should go for information. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.